This is the BioCentury Show. The BioCentury Show is brought to you by the 11th China Healthcare Summit. This October, BioCentury, BayHelix, and Insights partner, McKinsey & Company invite you to Shanghai to network, partner, and debate with industry peers and get a first-hand look at China's life sciences ecosystem as deal-making between China and the West accelerates.
Hello and welcome to the BioCentury Show. I am Simone Fishburn, Editor-in-Chief of BioCentury. I am so delighted to be joined today by John Oyler, long-time friend of BioCentury, in fact, CEO of BeiGene. John founded BeiGene in 2010 and has built the company to be a global biotech with a market cap today of around 19 billion. It's brought 3 internally developed products to market and established itself as a global player in oncology, largely from its BRUKINSA BTK inhibitor, whose sales trajectory we wrote about recently has had the strongest growth among the peers in the last couple of years. BeiGene also has a PD-1 inhibitor, Tevimbra, approved by FDA, and a PARP inhibitor, Partruvix, approved in China, and a rich pipeline of products in clinical development, some of which we'll get to talk about, maybe even some of the preclinical ones. John, welcome back to the show. It is always good to talk to you. I am going to start by asking you to walk us through the BeiGene evolution. And, as I pointed out, you have built the company from the ground up. Later, we might get into some of those lessons more broadly. But, even though you are, as a company, relatively young to reach the stage you have, it also seems there's been an unfolding story. You've had to adapt. The world around has changed a lot in those years. So, and who knows what's going to happen in the years ahead, which is something you also have to think about. Tell us from the BeiGene perspective, what is the same, what's needed to evolve as you drive the company from today to the incoming era?
Sure. Well, thank you. And it's always a pleasure to read BioCentury or be a part of things. So thanks for inviting us here today. When BeiGene was started, I think we had the same goal as many, companies in our space, of course, do great science and make medicine that can help people. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about our industry. But I think we added another layer to this, which was how do we try to make medicine in a way that it can be more affordable and more accessible to more people here in the United States and all around the world. And I think at the time we were starting our company, we thought maybe 1 in 6 people in the world got the best in class medicine, and maybe 3 in 8 in the United States couldn't afford their copays. So that was defined, day one as part of the problem we were trying to solve. And, I'm an entrepreneur, business person, trained at McKinsey, and I kind of stepped back and we looked at what are really the economics associated with our industry. And when you look at that, there's one striking realization. For most oncology medicines brought to patients, over 75% of the cost is driven by clinical trials. And that's a cost that has dramatically increased over time. And, today when I talk to my peers, they say 250 to 300,000 per patient enrolled on a clinical trial. So when we talk about a clinical trial that's 500 patients, you can do the math real quickly. It adds up very, very fast. When you look at a program like BRUKINSA, this wonderful medicine we've been able to develop and bring to patients, that's a program of over 5,000 patients. So you can roll up that math. And actually for hematology, the costs are much higher. But from that perspective, we were focused on this. And I think we thought you need to rethink the way you do everything, but primarily you have to start with clinical trials. From that perspective, part of our view was the reason clinical trial costs were high was threefold. The first was we just weren't involving enough centers here in the United States and across the globe in clinical trials. So we were out of patients. And the enrollment times were becoming very long, could be over 2 years to enroll a trial. And that dramatically increases the cost because every center needs to be involved in a trial to collect the same amount of information even longer. From the second perspective, it was clear that technology needs to improve. Still today, we have manual double entry, which is prone with errors, and taking information from the EMR system within a hospital to enter it into a clinical trial system. And thirdly, a lot of the clinical trials, the vast majority are run by third-party CROs, and they have a 30% markup. And in general, they, do not have an incentive structure to try to make things more efficient as they're paid by task. So as we started out, we said we ought to work on all of these things. And we wanted to move to a model where we had our own team. We were largely CRO-free, where we worked much more broadly here in the United States and globally to bring other clinical trial centers into the global clinical trial, infrastructure. And lastly, we wanted to work on the technology. And we thought if we did those things, we could perhaps reduce the cost, aspirationally half. And again, if it's 75% of the cost and you reduce it in half, that's more than reducing your cost by 1/3. Now, we're not there. We're maybe 2/3 of the way to what we aspired, but that was part of the beginning realization. And I think in every other area, we wanted to be very focused on cost and time. And that we got right in the beginning. I'm sure we got that right. Now I can jump. We got wrong.
I'm gonna, there's two directions, and I want to take a little bit of just to challenge one thing, which is the premise that the costs of drug development are what underlies the high prices. And, I've talked with people, and if drug development, I think it's obviously the case, and we'll talk some more about the mechanics, that those costs need to come down. But does it necessarily at a global scale, not just BeiGene, does it follow through that drug companies will charge less if it costs them less? Because to some degree, we also have a lot of inefficiencies based on few drugs, making it through. To some degree, the patient is paying for the inefficiencies of pharma companies, or, who are the main ones selling drugs. So how do you think about that?
Well, I think that's well said. And, I think we very much believe in, I'm an American, I'm a capitalist, so I believe in creating an open, fair system that is as competitive as possible. And I think that if you look at, pricing in certain circumstances and the infrastructure that we have today in the United States, you could certainly say we are not reaching that aspiration in the pharmaceutical industry. I think that's a fair point that you're making. And, what does that mean and how can you get back to it? And I think the fact that has occurred has actually led to a situation where you now see through mechanisms that have very positive elements, like IRA has a lot of good things in it, but essentially you're seeing an element of government price control in that. And from that perspective, I don't believe that's the best way to solve the problem. I believe a competitive landscape is, and that we really should be focused on policy to try to make sure that we're creating a competitive landscape in this industry that is transparent and competitive. And that if you do that, there's a lot of great science, and, capitalism will sort this out. But I think it is a real issue, and we should focus on policies that drive transparency and drive, a competitive environment. I just would make one other point. To BeiGene, when we launched Brukinsa, we believed very strongly we had a better medicine than Imbruvica, which was the standard of care and is a wonderful medicine. I mean, it really is. It's helped many, many people. But we believed we were safer and more efficacious. We ran a head-to-head study against Imbruvica, and on both safety and efficacy proved we were superior. There's no other medicine that's done that. And that's a bold study full of risk that's very expensive, and we were a small company, but we did it because we believed in the science and it translated. At the same point in time, when we launched in the United States, we actually launched at the lowest price in our class. Now, why did we do it? We did
sorry,
it
go ahead.
because that's part of who we are as a company, and it's what we said we would do. And we, because of the things we've done, do have a lower cost structure. And, we're able to do that. And we're able to do that and build a business that we think is just as sustainable as other folks. And I think, we're proud of that as a team. But that's something that is possible, and it's possible to do that and still be a very profitable company.
And, just as a follow on to that, because we did write about this, I think over the summer, I think it was it December 22 when that head-to-head, those results were published. I'm not sure if that's exactly when it was, but you have seen that be rewarded in sales, the trajectory of sales. We're going to go to a break in a couple of minutes, but I would like to just come back to this idea that you built in from the get-go, which is internal capabilities for running clinical trials. And I think now, you look like geniuses. Well, you always look to me like a genius, right? But you've got some resilience in an era where CRO and CDMO capabilities are really under strain. Part of that is geopolitical, but that's not really where I want to take it right now. What I wanted to do is, if your company's starting out, what does it take for a growing company to actually do this, to build that capability in-house? And what are the trade-offs? Should more companies be doing it?
Well, it's very hard. And, we were lucky. We were at a time and place where a lot of things were happening. And, it's hard because our clinical team is over 3,000 people spread all across the world. There's over 200 people in Australia. We're in Poland and Italy and Spain and all across Europe, and of course in the US. We're building out a lot now in Brazil. We're going to South Africa. And this team, it's all over the globe. That's very impossible for a small company to do in its early days. So it's a
Is it harder now than when you did it? Is it?
It's hard. It's hard because part of what enabled us to do that was the economic situation in our industry where capital was flowing readily that would enable people to do that. And, basically, when capital flows, you can invest. It also means deals that you do if you partner with pharmaceutical companies are bigger deals, and that creates additional, revenue. And I think, we, over our life, I think in January, I said we had generated $6 billion in revenue, and we had more than that, plowed back into investing in building this capability. I talked about what we knew. This is the same. Great science and do the clinical was what we knew. The things we didn't understand were how important the manufacturing and commercial team elements of this were. And I think on the manufacturing side, we really learned the hard way. We began manufacturing our PD-1 in Germany with BI. And suddenly one day we were told you can't manufacture here anymore because one of the major pharmaceutical companies had locked up that site for its PD-1. So suddenly we had an issue that really set back that program a couple of years because we, weren't able to do that ourselves. And I think that, the more mature we've become as a company, the more we understand how important those elements are, and also diversity. And I think this led to us building our own manufacturing capabilities, of which the most recent, really exciting project there is this $800 million biologic facility just outside of Princeton, New Jersey, in Hopewell. And it's a clinical center in biologic manufacturing. And this is really, really important to the bispecific, trispecific ADC programs that we're running because we don't have reliance. And actually, internally, we have multiple supply. And we also have third-party suppliers we work with.
Well, we're going to take a brief break and come back in a few minutes to continue the discussion where I want to dig into some of those pipeline programs you referred to.
Right.
From ADCs to bispecifics, deal-making between China and the West is accelerating. At the same time, the world is changing, requiring new strategies to succeed. This October, BioCentury, BeiHelix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company invite you to Shanghai for the 11th China Healthcare Summit. Network, partner, and debate with industry peers and get a first-hand look at China's life sciences ecosystem. Register today at biocenturychinasummit.com. Can't visit Shanghai? Register instead for a digital pass.
We are back on the BioCentury Show with BeiGene CEO, John Oyler. John, let's talk a little bit about your pipeline. Of course, it's heavily oncology focused. And I want to start by asking about the modalities. You stayed mostly with traditional modalities, small molecules and antibodies. As you mentioned before the break, you said the words ADCs, bispecifics. You're starting to go there in part through deals such as with Duality, quite recently, and in part via your own homegrown programs. So this is a sort of two-part question. The first is, how did you make this decision about when to go into a new modality, and what kind of additional expertise do you have to bring in to grow or enable it? That's the first part. I'll come back to the second question.
No, it's a great question. I think that when we started, we were in the small molecule area and we build out biologics. So in those two areas, a single monoclonal antibody and a small molecule inhibitor, that was something we built capabilities we learned to do. I think we also understand that a lot of small biotech companies really get hung up on CMC. So as these move downstream, we really invested in building strong downstream capabilities. In the small molecule area, we made a very conscious decision to move into protein degradation. And we have a great BTK degrader, an area we know well, that has over 300 patients worth of data, and we're really excited about. We believe it's going to be a medicine. And we also have a IRAK4, which is one of the few things we're doing outside of oncology, degrader that's also in the clinic, and an EGFR degrader that's soon to go in. In this area, we're excited about it. It takes exceptional chemistry. The CMC piece is hard with it, and it fits well with that. So that was a decision, we committed to, 4 or 5 years ago, and we're really happy about, and we think it fits what we can already do well, and it's where science is going. From the other perspective, in the biologic side, we became a very substantial biologics manufacturer. We've manufactured over, I think it is 10 million vials ourselves today that are commercial vials of monoclonal antibody. So we're substantial in that area. And as we built those capabilities, we saw monoclonals going to bispecific, trispecific ADC, and we began expanding into this area. Now, as with most things, we work with other companies, but we also have developed our own technology too. And we always want to be working on the technology that's on the cutting edge. So it's taken us a little time. We've played around with lots of different platforms of linkers and different things. But now we're in a position where we really are investing heavily in that area. And it's backed up by our own manufacturing, both antibody and ADC manufacturing, which is really unique, which lets you move quickly and at a low cost and flexibly. Now, what didn't we do? We didn't go into radiopharmaceuticals. We love it.
That was one of my questions, right?
No, it's super impactful. It's great medicine. Mm-hmm. Love to be in it, but we're like, we don't really, it's different and it's an additional investment and we don't know it. In cell and gene therapy, we didn't say, how do we put some stuff in the clinic early? We are working in that area, but we're working on what we believe are the fundamental engineering problems that create much higher cost. We're there, it's a small effort, but it's really trying to solve the fundamental problems. And the same is true in the nucleic acid area, really, the mRNA area. We're not a major player in that space, but trying to work on fundamental problems.
So you sort of partly answered my, follow-up question with that, which is, what should we expect to see in terms of diversity? You've mentioned cell therapies, RNA modalities, genetic medicines, radioligands, you're not there yet. So, here I'm sort of hearing on the one hand, if you can't really, is this a fair statement? Like if you don't feel like you can own and understand the manufacturing and the supply chain issues there, it creates a barrier for you to enter that. Is that what you're saying? Because the other side of this coin is, in this incoming era, how much do you think you can grow as a sort of MNC type player if you don't expand into these next gen modalities?
Yeah, it's a fair question. And I think that's why the problems we're trying to work on in that area are the problems that would lead you to be in the next generation of solutions if you were able to solve them. And certainly you're working on the things that we're working on the things, not in a huge way, but that we believe are critical to a fundamental shift in where that technology goes. That's different than putting them in the clinic. Putting something in the clinic early, a lot of temptation for biotech companies to do that because it creates a valuation change, it helps you raise additional capital. Or if you're a pharmaceutical company, you're trying to meet internal goals, you've invested in this, you want to show progress. I think for us, we're really trying to show scientific progress in solving key problems that are what we believe would lead to next generation solutions in that area. But even with that said, we're not putting 90% of our resources trying to solve those problems. It's probably, 5%, to be fair.
So you alluded earlier to a couple of non-oncology programs, the IRAK4 protein degrader for I&I and a BTK inhibitor. I'm not sure if you referred to this, but you've got that in phase 2 for lupus. And, that's an area that's hotting up. And we sort of, to some degree, you've got these targets that are sort of oncology adjacent, right? Turn the coin and you sort of see them in I&I. Do you expect to do more in either I&I or other, I should say immunity and inflammation, I&I, or other areas outside of oncology? What should we be watching for from BeiGene there?
Yeah, I think in that area, we've been playing around for a while. We have a small clinical team with expertise in that area. And, it is adjacent, as you pointed out. So certainly in I&I, it's probably 10% of what we're doing at this point in time. And I think as that moves forward, our interest and our investment in that area will likely grow. But we're excited about that space. That's really the only two areas at the moment we're working in, unless there's an unexpected turn, of science, which, you need to go there because it's the right thing to do for patients, and it looks very promising.
Neuro? I'm not going to see you in neuro. So,
not today.
John, you are now the big boys on the block, or the big boys and girls on the block. And so we've seen you do some significant partnering deals, and not yet seen any M&A. We do have a whole, audience of people out there who would love to know what BeiGene's looking for in either a partner or an acquisition. Is acquisitions just something you haven't found the right opportunity for? Is it not really part of the strategy? What should our listeners be thinking about when they want to partner with BeiGene?
No, we're open to everything and doing what's right, for building long-term great business. And there are a couple situations where we've been in very interesting conversations with people that we thought there could be a really good fit from that perspective. At this moment, nothing's come to fruition. But, we hope that'll change over time. Certainly acquisition's a possibility that we always look at. We also do license a lot of stuff,
Right.
To your point, we've licensed an ADC, we've licensed a CDK2 small molecule inhibitor. We're always looking in that area. And, we think there's a lot of great science we don't do. From the other perspective, the R&D team we have is incredible. And I think our ability to put many things in the clinic, we've guided over 10 oncology INDs this year, and we are on a path to do that. It's incredible, and, getting the early data is not that expensive, and it's possible to do. But to really push that many number of programs forward, and that's probably not something it's not a blip. This is the capacity we're building towards. It also means we are looking at how do we find other partners to help us push some of these programs forward in the clinic. Because even with a 3,000 person organization, even with the robust balance sheet and income statement that we have and are growing into, that's a lot of oncology. So we're looking at, partnering with companies much larger than ourselves, or not, any company that has that passion. And we're also looking to work with investors and potentially spin out some exciting, pieces of what we're developing from a research perspective and clinical perspective into new companies. So we're looking at all of that. It's really there's so much going on in science, and there's so much incredible data, and there's so many questions to ask and answer. And I think that now, the goal is let's answer the scientific questions we can as quickly as we can and as cost effectively as we can. And if the stuff's working, let's get it to patients. If it's not working, let's stop it. And if we need help developing it, let's find people to help develop it. Why not?
John, absolutely difficult. Well, I don't know if I would say it is a difficult world, but it's an interesting world and a lot of opportunities. So I want to segue from there, a slight shift in gear, and talk about what it takes to build a sustainable, high-value biotech. There are not many of you in that $20 billion stratosphere, partly because some get taken out along the way. We discussed this in last year's Back to School, and since then there's been, even that time and since then, there's been a lot of, let's call it, culling of biotechs from the bear market. And, we've seen recently those that are surviving are still cutting back, restructuring, polite words for shrinking their workforce. Let's just start by asking, Guru, what is your advice for companies facing this capital market now, where there seems to be sort of optimism on hold, is how I think about it, or patient optimism that things will get better, but it hasn't yet really happened. And how do you've been through several different changes of market. What should they do? How to think?
Sure. Well, this hasn't always been our market cap or our situation. And, people who know our story know that 3 years into our company, we almost missed payroll. And we were able to partner with German Merck just in time to save ourselves from bankruptcy. And so that's, a reality. And, I think that in this industry, always, the fortunes change quickly, and not just on your science, on the attractiveness of our industry and how it trades. That dramatically can affect your access to capital. And I think that, the lesson, those of us who have been through it many times understand. And, I've been through it. In 2009, it was ugly. When we were ready to IPO, the IPO market just closed entirely. And when we did IPO, we're trying to think what year it was, 2016, maybe. February of 2016, no company in the world had IPO'd, and Editas and us went out the same day to reopen the market. That was tough. And these times, they come and they go, and money flows freely, then it doesn't. What you have to understand is be really careful with your pennies, first of all. Secondly, I think you really need clarity that you want to build a long-term sustainable company or not. because your strategy is different. What you're doing and what you're building is different. The third thing, you really need to think about what capabilities do you need if you want to build a sustainable company. What is it about your company where you're going to have an advantage that other people don't? What is it that you're building? And, I think the last thing, in all of that is you have to be realistic. And, I think there's, famous letters from many venture capital investors that the second the market turns south a little bit, they send out to all their CEOs the doom and gloom, the world's ending, act now before it's too late. But that is because a lot of times it's very, very hard for a team that loves their company as much as we all do love our companies to adjust quickly. And I can say, we achieved profitability in the second quarter of this year. But I was on the phone with one of my board members this morning at like 5 a.m. And my conversation with him literally was, thank you for sitting down with me last December and having a hard conversation about where the world is today and what investors are really looking at and what they think, and encouraging us to do this. I think, the industry was guiding it was going to take us another year. But there was a lot of, frank conversations, which was hard to hear, even for me. And we heard it and we acted on it. And, it was a genuine thank you.
So I want to end on a question about boards because, you went there. I don't know if you saw me write this down earlier, maybe not. But you talked very early on in this conversation about building in manufacturing capacity and, your clinical trial strategy, but in particular, manufacturing capacity, which is a sort of bold decision. And all the way along, you have to do this. And one of the things I hear a lot from CEOs, apart from the fact that it's hard to talk to investors these days, is the conversation they have among their boards. And so how important, was that? How much is that conversation? Did you have to get all your board members aligned that that was a necessity for you? Did you have pushback? How do you manage that relationship, which is separate from your investor relationship, of course?
Yeah, I think that we were fortunate to have some great long-term strategic investors in our company from the beginning who have been through this and seen it. And we felt it was the right thing to do, but we always had support. And probably if we didn't think it was the right thing to do, they would have pushed us to do it. So, we were lucky. And this was, bigger, later stage, more broader experience than many investors a company starts with. But we were really blessed by that. And I can remember, always having senior support from that point of view to do things. And, this manufacturing, investment in the United States, it's over 800 million. It's not a small thing. And a lot of people could be, I can see a lot of situations where that would be a really hard thing to do. But to us, it just was clear. And we had a lot of support with it. In terms of building the board, I think you always want people that can help you. And, people that can help you don't agree with you all the time, by definition. If they always agree with you, they're not helping you. So, really what we've tried to do with our board, I don't know if it's right or best or anything, but we've tried to have very big transparency with our board. We've tried to share with them the worst things we're worried about, not brag about what we've done well. And we've really tried to sit down and have a situation where, we can talk about the hardest issues and hear opinions that are very different than our own. And it's painful often because you never like to hear that you can do things better or different, but it makes you a much stronger company. So I think we've always looked for those type of people, not just people that would agree with us.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I really look forward to next time and continued conversations, John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The BioCentury Show is brought to you by the 11th China Healthcare Summit. This October, BioCentury, BeiHelix, and Insights partner, McKinsey & Company invite you to Shanghai to network, partner, and debate with industry peers and get a first-hand look at China's life sciences ecosystem as deal-making between China and the West accelerates.